Hey guys, welcome to Wrench to Drive. Today we're going to have a look at the 4S Arrma Outcast, which is no longer an Outcast. Years ago I bought this as an Outcast, the very first generation, drove it for about a season, and then over the winter I converted it to a long wheelbase Outcast, so a Creighton wheelbase with a aftermarket body. And this is an even better version in my opinion, and the big reason because I like the long wheelbase. Where I have, we got really deep grass, great big fields that you can go cruising around in. So the Arrma 4S platforms are really nice because they got the big tires, but the short wheelbase Outcast, while it is awesome for doing tricks, if you like tricks, that is an awesome truck to get. If you like driving fast and doing, kind of, short, long jumps, that type of thing, the long wheelbase is definitely superior, at least in my opinion. Depends on your own personal preferences, right? So this is the 4S Mojave chassis. This is the XXL chassis, so the double extra long. So you got the short wheelbase that's on the Granite and the Cent and things like that, or sorry, Granite and the Outcast. Then you got the long wheelbase that's standard on like a Centon and the original Creighton 4S. Then they went to the extra long chassis on, I believe, the V3 Creighton. I'm not 100% sure if they started it before that, but that's about an inch longer than the long wheelbase chassis. And then for the Mojave 4S, they did this chassis, the XXL long wheelbase, and it makes the truck overall for 380 millimeter wheelbase, so pretty good size. And about 50 millimeters longer than the long wheelbase version, which is a substantial improvement. Now, the nice thing about this chassis is you can still use the 4S power box, well, any of the Arrma power boxes for that matter, because they are compatible with this chassis. This is the original 4S motor, it works really good, and this has the heavy-duty slipper in it with the big metal spur gear. And the 4-pad setup, but you definitely don't have to run that. I would say with the big tires, you're probably going to need at least the 3S Centon and Granite and Big Rock type slipper with the plastic spur gear, because it at least should be heavy duty enough to handle the power. But with the big metal. With the big metal slipper, it's super durable. Alright, so that's directly transferable. The steering is directly transferable. The only thing you got to do when you want to run this thing is come up with a body and some sort of plastic trim if you want everything to be nice and clean inside. So for me, what I'm using is this body that I've run on multiple vehicles now. It's a 3D printed kind of hammer truck body that I designed a couple of years back now. And I have run it on a crawler, on a DIY bouncer, and now it fits very, very nicely onto this bad boy. And all I had to do was make these body mount adapters. There's one on the front. It screws to the cage. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. And then these little clip-on jobbies on the back that also screw to the cage. And life is good. So I made up this body. It slips on really nicely. Pins go underneath instead of on top, so they're nicely hidden. It sits down just perfectly onto the chassis. I'll show you in some pictures. And away we go. So that worked out to be super, super easy. This is made out of TPU. It is held up extremely well. And my only real concern on this is because the truck itself is about twice as heavy as my TRX4 hybrid. I strongly suspect that if this thing ever lands upside down hard, from 3, 4, or 5 feet in the air, 6 feet in the air, a big jump gone wrong, landing upside down, I suspect this cage won't tolerate that super well. I think that will be the only thing that will test it. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. I'd like to think I'm competent enough to avoid a crash that big, but as soon as I just said it out loud on the interwebs, of course, I'm sure it'll be jinxed. As for tires, as I mentioned, you can get the Outcast tires, these big knobbies, on Amazon for $35 a pair. The one downside to this large form factor is some nice big short course truck tires like are on the Mojave 4S. There are not a lot of options. There's some out of China that are 138 millimeter diameter, and should fit on these hubs really nicely. They're about $70 a set, and the only thing is that I'm not totally convinced how awesome they'll be, so I definitely want to try these out first, because for $70 a set, I can buy a set of another set of these monster truck tires. I don't know. I don't like overpaying for something out of China without knowing if it's really worth the money, and that just seems like, boy, they'd have to be pretty good tires, because they're a little shorter than these and they're a little more narrow. So I'm thinking for grass running they should be nice, but again, without knowing if they're good, I'm a little reluctant to pull the trigger for $70. It's not quite as cheap as you'd like, and the Mojave ones are expensive. And they're hard to find. So now the drive shaft I have made up is actually a little hybrid jobby, and all I did, I used the long end of the drive shaft kit for this end, I used the short end, and I made a middle piece. So all I did, this is the normal end piece, right? Cut it off right here. That's where the spline part ends. So I cut that off. I inserted a short end drive shaft in this end. I cut the short end down because you need the spring to sit in here. You need some room for it. So it's about probably, I don't know, 20 millimeters sticking in there. Then I took the spring and I cut one down. So this is the leftover piece. So I cut it down to about yay long. And according to my measurements, I should be able to cram this baby in there, pop it out, and away we go, just like the original setup. I used 2 screws to anchor it. In theory, I'm hoping it's balanced because they offset each other with just a little bit of front to back room, so I made sure they didn't butt into each other. And away we go. And then I'm going to do up a bearing mount. The extra long wheelbase chassis has one built in. I think I want it farther up, and that's the way I set up this drive shaft. So it'll either go right there beside the steering box, or more likely towards the back here. Just a little ways farther, but I want this to be as stable as possible. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think there's going to be a weakness problem. Obviously the test will be in the running, and I'm trying to see if I can show you. I was farting around with this to see how smoothly I could get it to turn, and I don't know how well it's going to show up on the video, but it doesn't seem super out of whack balance wise. Actually, looking at it on the screen there, I think I see more wobble than I originally thought. With a ruler laid over this, it actually seems like it's pretty straight, so we shall see. Anyways, that's how you make a drive shaft, and like I said, there's a fair bit of compression in there, so I'm pretty sure it'll still work. And hopefully it latches itself nicely in place. That's the only concern, but I can always cut another spring. The nice thing is the drive shaft kit is extremely cheap. It's only about $8, I think it is, and it comes with the long piece, the short piece, and the middle piece, and a spring, so you're basically laughing. The chassis right now is not a screaming good deal. On Amazon in Canada, you can get a ton of Arrma parts these days, and a lot of them are basically the US price in Canadian dollars, which is super sweet. I'm definitely kind of going through and trying to figure out what are the parts I'm most likely to need and order up a few while the prices are so reasonable. But this chassis, unfortunately, was not available. I ordered it through the local hobby store and got it for the Arrma price, which is $45 or $46. Little pricey, but I really wanted to make this a long wheelbase truck, so I decided to pull the trigger on it. And it is a really nice solid looking chassis. It's got like a double layer of ribbing along each side here, should make it fairly stiff. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to do up the center brace. If you have some DIY knowledge, you can use a piece of aluminum and lengthen it. For my initial conversion, I actually used a 3D printed extender, and it seemed to work just fine. It's one of those things. I'm not sure if I ever had any crashes big enough where the stiffener came into play. It's one of those things you don't know how much you needed it till something goes wrong or whatever. With this one, because of the really long wheelbase and the great big tires and everything, the potential for a lot of load, I am very tempted to buck up and buy a piece of aluminum bar and make a longer brace. We shall see. Sadly, aluminum is not super cheap, and something like Metal Warehouse, it's hard to get a good deal. I don't have a good source. If I can find a piece of aluminum bar, that obviously will be, or actually, sorry, aluminum tube. Tube is generally better for this sort of thing than bar. It's lighter and should be a little less prone to bending. But anyways, that is the last thing. And then all I'm going to do is where this body sits. I basically just need a more or less vertical bit of protection to keep rocks out of the inside, and I think it'll work pretty well. And there's also the option of adding more panels to close things off a little bit better, but we shall see. So there you go. The actual conversion is super painless. You literally unbolt the front end bulkheads, the front and rear bulkheads, you take it apart, you pull the arms off, you swap everything over. I would say if your car is reasonably clean and you don't really want to do any farting around, you can get it done very, very quickly, probably an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I cleaned everything up within an inch of its life and went through the diffs and blah, 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 made sure everything was good. And I spent at least a couple extra hours farting around. The only thing that was broken this time around was actually a wheel hex. It broke when I tried to crack the grub screw loose, so I'm guessing it took a good hit and cracked or something. Since the last time I reported, I'm trying to think what else is broken. So I'll go backwards. Right now this thing has all whatchamacallit, RPM arms, because I broke one rear and one front, so I ended up needing a pair of RPMs. So it's been running RPM arms. It doesn't have a whole lot of abuse on the RPM ones, so they are all in one piece and have had no problems. I put a new wing on the back because they were cheap on Amazon. I was too cheap to buy a wing when I initially destroyed it years ago, but I believe I got it on sale for $8 before Christmas, if I recall correctly. It was a smoking good deal. And the only downside is it doesn't come with any hardware. Doesn't come with the protection screws, and I actually don't have any screws that fit these holes, so I got to do something about that before I run it. I'm still running this wheelie bar mount that's printed out of TPU. Everything else is good. Oh, and the only thing I had to do to my body was I flipped over the rear body mount, so I just inverted it 180 degrees. So these used to stick up, now they stick down. So that for my body. For the body I'm using, that worked out nicely. Other breakages. Oh, I took out one rear diff in the second year of running it, late in the year, I believe, if I recall correctly. So a lot of people complain about the diffs in these things, and that is something I simply cannot support. I found them to be really durable. I've only taken one out, and the first year, like a full summer, I was doing a lot of tricks, and I'm not very good at tricks, so the fact that I didn't take out a diff in that whole summer of being as abusive as a person could possibly be to this thing, I don't know, they're not that weak. And the nice thing about the diff case is they are super cheap. They used to be about $12. They're actually under $10 on Amazon right now. So, I don't know, in my book, the $60 metal diff, you kind of have to go through quite a few diff cases, plastic diff cases, before you get to that stage, right? So I don't have a huge problem. Oh, that's right. I broke a front shock. I think it's this one. I actually glued it, and it is held up to being glued with crazy glue far, far, far longer than I thought it would. I have a spare set of shocks, and they're actually going to go on here before I drive it because they're shiny new and full of oil. Off of Jenny's RC years ago, because when I broke this I ordered some and then I glued it and it actually held up so well I kept running it. But at this point these shocks are bone dry. They got no oil in them, and oil is $10 a thingamajiggy. I'm pretty sure it'll take more than one thingamajiggy to fill these shocks. I could be wrong, but if it's one, so that's $10 worth of oil. If it's two, that's $20 worth of oil. I paid $40 for the spare set of shocks. and I stored them inverted, so they have not leaked at all. All I got to do is give them a little once over and make sure that everything's still lubed up and the O-rings are in one piece, because I don't want to just see all that oil puke out. But swap the shocks over, and away we go, ready to rock. So this thing has been an absolute tank for me. It's by far it took the most abuse that first year, but I get it out every year and do some cruising around. The tires are still in pretty good shape, and all I've done is try to avoid too much crazy pavement abuse, because these bad boys are expensive. I have had precious few problems with this truck. It is definitely a beast. I highly recommend it. If you're into something with a little more jam than like a Sentin or a Granite or a Big Rock 3S, the 4S trucks are definitely a huge step up. And they run really well in deep grass. If you got a lot of grass fields where you live, this truck with the big tires, they are quite nice in the fields. Yeah, and that's it for this time on Wrench to Drive, where we ask the eternal question: do you drive to wrench, or do you wrench to drive? See you next time.